I was just obsessed with joining the top companies because those were the ones I was seeing on social media. I was obsessed with joining LinkedIn for many years. In fact, I applied 5 times and got in on the fifth attempt.
Ken's Nearest Neighbors is powered by Z by HP. Z is HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today I had the pleasure of interviewing Aash Viswanathan. He is a senior data scientist at Atlassian with a focus on monetization. He was previously a product data scientist at LinkedIn, supporting new feature development and LinkedIn Learning. Aash was also a data analyst at a scooter rental startup, Lime, where he worked on fleet analytics. He holds a degree in economics from the University of Chicago. In this episode, we learn about Aash's biggest challenges breaking into the analytics career path. He actually applied to LinkedIn 5 times before landing the job. We also touch on the psychological side of success in this field and how obsession can be either a really positive or a negative force. I hope you enjoyed the show. I know I enjoyed our conversation. Aash, thank you so much for coming in. As we had just mentioned, your last name is pronounced, I believe, Viswanathan.
That's right.
You had mentioned to me that in your native country and city of origin is roughly translated to Master of the Universe. And I think that was that right, Master of the Universe, or was it a little bit different?
Lord. Yeah, it's Lord of the Universe. It's 2 words. Vishwa is universe, and Nathan is Lord. And it's a name for one of our Hindu gods that I think just kind of stuck on as family name.
I love it. Well, to me, that's so true, and it's maybe not the whole universe, but at least the job domain and understanding yourself and taking a look at your own personal universe and growing from it. I think that's very fitting because you're introspective. You've gone through this really cool journey that we're going to share, working at a tech startup, going to LinkedIn, kind of forging your own path after that. And I'm really happy we could come together. I think we met loosely on Clubhouse, and I was like, I have to have this guy on the podcast. Yeah. He has such a cool story.
That was fun, man. Clubhouse has been a lot of fun for meeting people. And, you're not the only podcaster I've met on there. It's amazing how folks who are in the space tend to really gravitate towards where conversations are happening. Clubhouse is one of those places now.
Yeah, I interviewed Christian Bordeaux a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yeah,
and that episode's been very popular. He has a great story as well. And I find that people who are willing to share their stories, they might have better stories, or they might be just better storytellers, and that makes them come on and have these really interesting conversations with me. And so I'm super stoked about bringing in more great storytellers, because people learn more from a really compelling story message, even if the content is the exact same and it's just told in a less effective way. So let's start kind of getting into your story. And the first question I almost always ask is, how did you first get interested in data? How did you first get interested in technology? Was it this slow progression of hey, I'm learning a little bit more and then I love this? Or was it one moment where you're like, I saw data applied here and it popped into my head, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I mean, so there's multiple things here. There's computers, there's the tech industry, and then there's data and data science in general. I got into computers super early. My dad brought home a compact PC in the mid 90s. And, I spent most of my childhood and adolescence trying to get the latest computer games to work on whatever equipment I had, so just like a lot of other people in our generation, just getting used to computers. But I never really thought of them beyond just being a part of my day-to-day life with email and games and such. But I was not interested in the tech industry at all. I dropped all my science coursework at the age of 15. I went on to study economics in university. I always thought I would get into the financial services industry. But my first, 4 or 5 years out of college, I was working in a regulatory space and e-commerce space. And I was working as an analyst handling kind of operational aspects of data transfer. So I was working with spreadsheets. I got really good with Excel. I learned all the hotkeys and all the cool tricks you could do to like get things done
Needless to
with
say,
the tool.
you were not a Mac user at the time.
Yeah, at the time, I actually lobbied hard to get provision to PC just so I could use all the hotkeys and not the Mac hotkeys on Excel. But then I started, noticing the obvious limitations of Excel. Like sometimes I would need to work with large files, like more than 20 or 30 gigs, and I wouldn't be able to load those because my computer wouldn't have enough RAM. Like I think I had a 16 gig RAM back then. And, some of the spreadsheet operations I had to do, like lookups and complex formulas, they started to get slow. So repetitive manual tasks were also a thing. And if I wasn't like feeling fully awake, I would risk making a mistake, and then I would have to redo a whole bunch of work. So like I started facing all these problems. I started looking into ways to kind of improve my workflow because you get burned at work one or two times, you're definitely looking to how to like minimize mistakes. So that's when I started learning Python overnights and weekends because I heard that with Python you could write scripts that automate some of the work that you do. So I would go home at night, learn some Python, and then come back the next day and try to implement it somehow in my day-to-day workflow. And what I was doing was using it to either break big spreadsheets into smaller ones or to automate kind of repetitive manual tasks. And obviously to minimize the error in doing those repetitive manual tasks. I started, but then it led to like so much other stuff. I started using Python to programmatically access data from APIs instead of downloading and handling files manually. And then slowly started to learn more about databases and big data problems. This was around like 2013, 2014, when data science was getting pretty big on like Twitter and social media. People were writing Medium blogs about it. So I was sitting on Twitter following some data scientists, and I really wanted to be like them. I obsessed over it, to like to a somewhat unhealthy extent, I would say. And it kind of encouraged me to keep exploring this space and to maybe take some risks that I hadn't considered taking. So yeah.
Well,
That's how I got into data science. It's just like through the organic development of my role, of my growth as an analyst, I would say is how I got it.
I mean, I see a lot of parallels between my journey and yours on that front. So I actually also studied economics in undergrad. And the reason that I was pursuing more advanced tools is because the tools that I was using, mostly Excel or Google Sheets when I was starting out, they weren't capable of doing the analysis that I wanted to do, whether it was size of data or whether it was the type of algorithms. I mean, essentially in Excel, you can run a linear regression and it works relatively well. But if you want to do any more advanced modeling, which is what I was trying to do with predicting sports outcomes, you're pretty limited there. I mean, you can run some simulations, you can do whatever you want, but like the simulation package in Excel is like $700 a year or something. It's you have to pay for it. It's extensively expensive, and it's like, well, what can I do? What tools or where does this guide me so I can answer these questions or I can get better at my job, or whatever that might be? And that's a common theme that I see is people either love the technology or they love what the technology allows them to do. And I think we're pretty similar in the sense that we want to do a good job at what we're working on. And if our tools aren't good enough, we're going to go out and try and learn and expand on that front as well.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of like Excel dogma out there. And I mean, I think Excel is a great tool for a lot of stuff. I still personally like using it, especially for just like thinking about, I like using it like a whiteboard for, like visual exploration into stuff. Or yeah, there are use cases for it. But I don't think, and you can use Excel for literally anything you want. I think people have built games with it and stuff. But yeah, I think that you want to do your job well. I agree with that. And it doesn't matter what tool it is that you use. It's gotta help you get the job done. Yeah.
Yeah. And to be clear, for everyone listening, I don't have anything against Excel. In my work, I still use it for some visualization when the data is usually already in an Excel format. But there are capabilities for everything. Like there's some things that Python is not as good for as Excel, which it pains me to say a little bit, but if you want to just look and explore data really quickly and it's small data, you open an Excel workbook, it's pretty easy to do that.
Yeah.
So let's continue on from your journey, just your first transition into data, and getting your first data analyst job versus getting your first data scientist job, what that transition was like, and also just what your experience was like breaking into the broader field in general of data analytics.
Yeah, I would start by saying that it was a long and arduous journey. I think I first got into learning how to write code and looking into data science libraries sometime around like 2013. By the time I got my first industry role, it was the end of 2017. So it took me roughly like 4 to 5 years. And it was hard. Over time, I managed to pick up many of the skills. And I would say that time frame was maybe about 18 to 24 months. So about 2 years into this, into learning how to write code and use the tools, I believed that I was ready for interviews. But I lacked the practical industry experience of applying those skills. And so I went on to spend 2 full years getting interviews and then ultimately getting rejected. I got rejected everywhere. I had multiple on-site rounds with Apple, Facebook, LinkedIn, so many other places where, I was getting past the resume screening phase. I was going into interviews, I was going to on-sites, but something or other like would happen and I was just not managing to land an offer. So I was not meeting the standards set by the industry, and I mean the whole industry, because this was literally, I was getting rejected everywhere. So I think I kind of got into the classic chicken and egg problem of you need experience to get a job, and you need a job to get experience. And I think a lot of people kind of understand this in their own way. That was one challenge that I faced. Another hard thing about tech company interviews is that the industry is really full of brilliant, highly skilled, highly experienced individuals. And in the job market, when you're applying, you're actually competing against these people, which I think makes things a little harder. It's not like, it's not like you apply for a role, and very rarely is it that, the role is just for like entry level applicants. I think they're starting to be more common, but they're still not as common. Another challenge that I faced was, for the most part, the industry wants to hire already experienced people. So there isn't much of a concept of let's hire somebody and invest in developing them into a senior or experienced person. I think if you look at the top tech companies, most of the data science jobs they post are for senior roles. And I think the hesitation to hire somebody a little green and pair them up with someone more experienced is because data scientists are expensive. And if you ask a data scientist to spend an hour hand-holding a new hire, that I think is seen in many places as less valuable or less impactful use of that person's time than actually working on whatever other work there is to do. And you've seen this in the industry. There is usually way more work than there are qualified data scientists to do the work. So that was another one. I think, there was definitely, this is true. This is even more so true today. If you apply to a job, you are also competing against just thousands of faceless candidates who have no shot in hell at getting the job.
But it's noise, right?
Right,
And
it's
you don't
noise.
want to get lumped in the noise.
Thanks to the internet, it has never been easier in history to apply for a job. Like, the only prerequisite is an internet connection. So a top company can post a data scientist job and get like hundreds or thousands of applications from unqualified or underqualified candidates. And so they have to use, it's unfeasible for a recruiter or a hiring manager to go through all these. So they have to use these like ultimately biased heuristics to filter out resumes. So that's another challenge. So all these challenges, I think, like, definitely harmed me, or like, they played a role in the time it took for me. But I think the biggest one was, my own. I just wasn't meeting the industry standards for experience. And And eventually I got pretty desperate. I decided any company will do. And like even a no-name startup. And that's how I landed my first industry role in a brand new startup that had been in operation for 3 months. And that was Lime. Very luckily for me,
Not a no-name startup anymore.
that was a rocket ship. And yeah, just managed to get in at the right time.
Well, there's something I think it's really important to highlight about that is your focus was on big tech companies. Your focus was on getting into these, companies that are really pushing data science to the limit, that are looking for experienced candidates, that are trying to do the most on that front. In my mind, if you want to work in that industry, incredible. It's going to be a harder path, but there's, just as you mentioned, there are alternatives. You can work in startups. You can work in non-tech companies. There's every company in 2021 that's large is hiring data scientists. It can be electricity company, it can be a hardware store, it could be whatever it is. They're going to have roles, and they're going to be, frankly, less competitive. But the work you're going to be doing is still accruing you real experience. It's still real data science work. And if you'd like to go transition to one of these more well-known tech companies in the future, you're going to be able to fill out that prerequisite, get paid fairly well, and be able to develop at another place just as you did.
Right. And I think, yeah, this is a really valuable insight. So any business that operates at sufficient scale is going to collect enough data to warrant hiring a data scientist. So it doesn't need to be a tech company. You could be like Nike and just selling shoes, but selling millions of shoes and doing millions of transactions, you need data scientists. And it's not a tech company in the traditional sense of the word, but the distribution channel is like tech driven with e-commerce and other logistics and stuff. So yeah, I also think this perspective, I definitely lacked this perspective a few years ago. I don't think I had, I don't think I really had anyone who could have I knew anyone who could have given me this insight. I was just obsessed with joining the top companies because those were the ones I was seeing on social media. I was obsessed with joining LinkedIn for many years. In fact, I applied 5 times and got in on the 5th attempt. And the reason for that was because LinkedIn, I knew LinkedIn as a place where the first data scientist job description got created. This was a long time ago now. I think it was around 2009 or 2010. There was the head of data products and chief scientist at LinkedIn, DJ Patel, is credited as one of the people who came up with the job title of data scientist. And he eventually went on to become the first chief data scientist in the White House under President Obama. So I was following all this stuff, and I was looking at the work that his team was putting out. And, I wasn't seeing a lot of it. I was seeing what they put out publicly. And it was amazing. It was just aspirational. So I had this sometimes unhealthy obsession with joining LinkedIn as this sort of temple of data science. And yeah, if I went back and told myself and like advised my younger self, I would say, well, that's like a really great aspiration, dude. But you can really pick up this experience anywhere.
Yeah, well, there are a couple of things that I took away from that when we first spoke about it. And the first thing is that you did set a very clear goal. And I think that that's a very good thing, right? It might have been on the first couple of passes, not the most easily, or maybe even more than a stretch goal. But I think it's
Definitely.
incredible that you were able to get there. And I mean, you didn't give up on it, which is a really important part. I think that
I never gave up on it, and it was hard to in some ways. When I joined Lime, I was out in the Bay Area, so I started this journey out in Colorado, and in between, I actually moved to the Bay Area because I felt that being in the middle of the industry would actually help me not get rejected as much. And yeah, I can go into that. But when I started at Lime, I was working in the peninsula, which is kind of a little between the 2 big cities in the Bay Area, and eventually they moved their headquarters to San Francisco, a block away from LinkedIn's San Francisco office. So I would walk past it every day, and look up at the big old logo and be like, I wonder what the data scientists are doing in there. And so, it just remained as this goal. It was following me around, it felt like.
Well, so one of my favorite books, it's called The Four Disciplines of Execution. And so one of the principles is that you create a scoreboard or a leaderboard, and it just reminds you constantly of the goal you're trying to accomplish. And usually in that sense, it's showing you how much closer you're getting to it. But in a sense, you were getting physically closer to the building. So
I went from being like 3 states away to a block away, and eventually working in the building. It was great as a physical marker of progress.
And so how did you make that transition to actually working for them? So if I recall, at Lime, you were a data analyst, and you went from data analyst at Lime to data scientist at LinkedIn, correct?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah.
Was it harder than even breaking in, or was it, I mean, you applied 5 times, so it must not have been easy, but
No. So I'll tell you what, it was a lot easier than breaking in the first time. At Lime, I was very early hire. So in terms of like data people, there was one engineer on data platform. There was myself as a data analyst. There was also a data analyst intern. And, it started out with kind of 3 of us, one person doing product stuff, one person doing operational stuff, and one person doing like data engineering. And I got to be involved in some pretty interesting things. Like, this company was new. They didn't have a data warehouse. We needed to have a data warehouse. So, like decisions had to be made, like what's ETL going to look like? What's the schema going to look like? And I mean, I had no idea what I was doing, but I kind of spent a lot of time with the data engineer trying to understand what she was doing and learn a lot from that. And at the same time, I also got to be a part of Lime's growth. I think the 15 months that I was there, Lime raised 3 times. And, when I started, they were at like 150 million valuation. When I left, they were at $2.4 billion valuation. And so they were just like constantly raising money and launching new markets. And, like the work to do is just like expanding a lot. I got to be a part of some of those investment rounds, like, like investors would come and talk to Lime, and then they would request data to do their like due diligence. And so I got to, I was getting tagged in these super secret spreadsheets where it was, you're supposed to like put the actuals from the business there for the investors to look at and decide whether they're investing or not. And that was really cool. But then, eventually decided that, I really wanted to go back and chase that dream again. So I applied, I think in the previous few times I'd applied to LinkedIn, I went via a referral. This time I just applied cold through LinkedIn.com, like under the jobs tab. And I got a call back, and it was great. And I went through the interviews, and, this is embarrassing. The 5th time interviewing, like one of the interviewers had already rejected me once in the past, but I did well. I think the experience really made a difference. Like it was not even that much experience. It was, like I said, 15 months. But the 15 months, I think what it gave me was I knew how to use the tools before, but I didn't know how to use them situationally or contextually until I actually worked at Lime and went through the motions and practiced. And I think more generally, going from a data analyst to a data scientist. So data science is this kind of umbrella term. It covers data analysis and other professional activities like, data modeling, experimentation, machine learning, and so on. So if you're a data analyst, you're already part of the way towards being a data scientist. And in my opinion, all you need is some practice in one or two of the other fields. No one's expecting an individual to be a master at every single field. So for me, although I lacked practical experimentation experience, I had theoretical grounding. I studied under under Professor John List. He's one of the experts in like social science experiments. That was in university. And when I was at Lime, like I said, I got to be a part of the very first data warehousing setup. So I started to slowly build more competency in these other areas outside of data analysis, but that are part of data science. I think that helped me with the transition.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP. HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z4 workstation. I really love that the Z line can come standard with Linux, and they also can be configured with the data science software stack. With the software stack, you can get right into the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a reason why a lot of these companies are looking for people that have real world experience, is because it helps you do a better job. I think working at a company that has less data science capabilities to start with can be a good thing, because you can shape that process and you learn so much from having accountability over a system, and taking that into a new interview, I think, is one of the most powerful things that you can do, is to say, hey, I led this project. This is what I learned from it. This is what maybe I could have done better. That's what any company that I can think of would want. I will also say, on the five interviews front, even if they see you a second time, right, like, they're seeing your growth as well. There aren't many times, like, it's really hard to predict how a candidate is going to blossom in a company if they're motivated to learn more, if they're motivated to improve themselves, right? And by interviewing at the same place multiple times, they can track that journey with you. They can see how far you've come. And that can be a very powerful thing in your favor, is that, they didn't like me before, but they've seen how much I've grown in this short period of time. What am I going to be like in 3 years? I'm going to be running this place, So I think
that's literally that scorecard that you were talking about. That was my scorecard. It was like the first time I got past the recruiter phone screen. The second time I got past the first phone screen. And then the third time I got into the second phone screen. And the fourth and fifth times I went on site. The fourth time I got rejected on site. The fifth time I got an offer. And it marks this clear progression for me over 5 years, where that I can use to just reflect and think, yeah, like a couple of years ago, there's no way I would have passed this interview. And what that 15 months of experience gave me was a ton of stuff to talk about in those interviews, to demonstrate not just how I knew how to use like some tools, but how I'd actually use them. And to your point, it's like you get to talk about how you had like full responsibility over a certain area of business. So for me, it was like the fleet analytics at Lime. I was building dashboards that helped local market managers figure out what was going on with their fleet, like what percentage of vehicles were out of batteries and needed service, or just needed to be moved around to an area with higher demand. Yeah, this, like every single project that I supported, I think like gave me something positive to showcase about my experience.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I also think it's really important to highlight how you describe a data analyst. So you were talking about how a data analyst, they're already doing a portion of the data science work. So a data scientist can go and do anything, in my mind, from data engineering to model production, or like even producing tools at a certain point, right? And the data analyst is focusing on, okay, sometimes you're doing data cleaning, is that part of the pipeline? Sometimes most of the time you're exploring the data, and sometimes you're even doing some light model building. And if you're a data analyst and you index more on the SQL and you're focusing more on the back half of the pipeline, you can move pretty easily into a data engineering role. It's the same skill set. You're already touching some of that. If you're saying, hey, I want to do more of the model building, I want to explore the production, that's the whole pipeline that a data scientist is working on. You can index into that role. And if you want to go all the way in and really focus on the production, like, you have to maybe work through that other part of the pipeline. But if you want to index on the software engineering and those types of things, you can potentially move into a machine learning engineering role. And so in my mind, that position of that starting place is one of the best possible ones to, break into any of the I guess, like, career tree related to data science.
I would agree. I would say that in order to get a data analyst job that can serve as a good career springboard, I think all you really need is a sufficient enough understanding of how how like SQL works. I think that's it. It's definitely going to help if you know know a scripting language. I knew both Python and R going into being a data analyst, but I would say, like all of that is downstream from you just getting access to the data, and business data is stored in databases. And I think the bare minimum is you got to know how to get any data out of any database. And once you get it, like you can do whatever you want with it. But yeah, I think that's like the bare minimum. You don't need experience though. I think all you need is like you just need to know how SQL works. And SQL is literally eight possible statements. It's select, from, where, group by, having, order by, limit, offset. That's it. That's all. That's every possible SQL statement. So I would say it's an easy and crucial step to master on the way.
Yeah. I mean, I might get some heat from this, but I don't consider SQL a programming language even, right? It's a retrieval interface, right? I mean, I guess in theory you could write a loop or you can do some of those types of things, but to me, it's like it is far easier to learn than a Python or R or some of these other things because it's stripped of to be exactly what you need to serve this one purpose of retrieving or writing to a database, right? It's like a
Definitely.
Yeah.
It is, the way that I like to think about it is like, so whenever I go into like a new place, like a new company, I started a new gig at Atlassian 2 weeks ago. This is what I'm doing there, is just making a mental map of the parts of the database that I care about in my role. And then SQL then is just like a way of specifying a route through that map and saying, go here, grab these rows, go there, grab these rows, match them up, like throw away the ones I don't care about, and then count. Like just do simple things like count or some things. And so it's kind of a combination of retrieval and then some aggregation that you can specify.
Filtering,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's important. I like SQL. I mean, it's not. I wouldn't say by any means it's easy to learn SQL, but one, it's a necessary step, and two, it's not something you should be scared of. I mean, you can get data from almost any database with select star from certain table. It's literally like 20 characters most of the time, and like you're doing it, you're writing SQL, right?
That's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's kind of gotten to the point now where even if it's like from the simplest possible database to the most like sophisticated distributed systems in the world, all have a SQL interface. So you should be able to access data from literally anywhere using SQL. It's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was using, oh my goodness, in grad school, we were working with some MapReduce stuff, and I can't remember if it was Hive or Pig, but it's written exactly like SQL, right? And it's like,
right. So it used to be the case that distributed databases required you to know how to do MapReduce in order to even like get data out of them. You don't need it anymore. You can write SQL, and like computers will translate that into MapReduce.
They'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. So to shift gears just back a little bit. So I want to hear more about your experience at LinkedIn. Obviously, you were there for a while. And one thing you'd mentioned earlier is that we talked extensively about the barriers of entry for breaking into the tech field in general. Is there anything you learned about while at LinkedIn that can help with those barriers? I mean, I think LinkedIn, for the most part, is one of the things that does break down some of those barriers. I can send a message to almost anyone. One, how did you experience that product as someone working on it? And two, how did you experience the data science work as well?
So like, I think I historically have not used LinkedIn particularly well. And I learned a lot about it from working there. And, I think I used to approach LinkedIn as kind of this, I wasn't going there very frequently. I would mostly use LinkedIn around the times when I was, exploring getting a new job. I think a lot of people do this, right?
Yeah.
But that's a totally an okay way to, like, an acceptable way to use LinkedIn. It's just not the most powerful way to use LinkedIn, is what I've discovered. I'll go into that a little bit. But being a data scientist at LinkedIn was in some ways a bit of a shocker for me because I mean, I'd been working with data for a while at this point, but not at the scale that LinkedIn does. To give you some context, like LinkedIn's so massive that I mean, there's 700 million people, and just the number of things getting recorded every minute or every hour in the databases is very large. So, there are like, it's just simple actions like someone clicked on something, someone reacted to something, someone posted something, someone DM'd somebody. There's so much activity going on in the platform that even your simple queries like select star, like select count a star
from, yeah.
Like count a star on some of the tables was a prohibitively expensive function to run because it's got like, I don't know, 15, 20 years worth of like activity data from the platform. So I had to quickly learn how to use some new tools to handle that scale. And for me, that was Apache Spark, which is now quickly becoming like the industry standard for dealing with like large compute problems in memory. And they also used a Hadoop file system, which was something that I hadn't worked with before. Again, pretty simple to figure out after like a few days or weeks of working with it, but also something new. I think what was the biggest difference for me going into LinkedIn was being a part of a data science team of like 300 plus. That was new. I was, before I was in the industry, it was just me studying data science stuff on the side. And when I was at Lime, there were people, but I think you could count on your two hands how many people worked on data. At LinkedIn, it was so massive that, not only was it massive, I was kind of shocked at just the level of talent and competency within the team at LinkedIn. And it gave me, I think like 2 weeks into my gig there, I thought back and say, yep, no wonder I didn't get a job the last 4 times I tried, like I was definitely not ready to be in this like group of people. And I even questioned, like for a long time at LinkedIn, I even questioned whether I belonged amongst the best and brightest there, because that's literally what, like, you're not just talking about average data scientists, man. Like the data scientists at LinkedIn have built like the experimentation platform for Microsoft Bing, and like, these massive projects. They've literally invented their own like methodologies for doing things, and they've open sourced it, and they're just super accomplished. And going in as somebody who's like got maybe some of that stuff in their future is like, it can be a little intimidating.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, that's something I think all of us face, and it's important to have those conversations. And I think it's more commonly termed as imposter syndrome in this field. And that's something I'd be interested in understanding how you worked through those feelings when you were there.
So, yeah, we talk about this a lot in tech, right? It's imposter syndrome. And I had been hearing the term from just on social media before I started out in the industry. I didn't really get it until I experienced it. The way I kind of dealt with it was by talking with others. I spoke with my manager about this a bunch, and she was like, well, so like this is another source of insecurity for me. Most of the people I was working with had like multiple advanced STEM degrees or PhDs or whatever. And here's me, like dropped all my science courses at 15, completely self-taught, no master's degree or any advanced education beyond a bachelor's. And that was another source of insecurity. And I think something my manager told me that was really helpful was, she said, well, look, like, yeah, sure, like we have all these PhDs on the team, but I don't know if I can if I can put all of them in front of an executive and ask them to explain something complicated. You bring your strengths to the team, and it's almost like you're playing a position. So how like in soccer, for example, you've got like everyone on the top teams is like a really gifted and skilled player, but then they play different. They're specialized in different positions. So like you'll put your goalie out front to kick into the other opposition's goal. You put them where they belong, and so I think I quickly found that there are areas where I think the team needs contributions. I could step in and contribute in those areas, regardless of how good everyone else is.
I love that. And I also think it's important to remind yourself that, hey, we're all data scientists here. I was able to do this without the advanced degrees. I was able to get into this role. I was able to do this work. And that in and of itself is pretty a compelling story to tell to tell yourself there, is that, hey, I did this in spite of not having those advanced degrees or whatever it might be. And I think we'll both agree you don't need advanced degrees to break into this field. Maybe to do some of the research or some of the like pure mathematical algorithm building, you're likely not going to get into one of those roles at NVIDIA or like Google working on TensorFlow or whatever it is. But I mean, that's okay. I personally don't want to be doing that work. And if I did, I probably would have gone and got a PhD already, because that's an extension of that interest to begin with. So I love that your managers or mentors' advice there, but it's also important to think, just like you were looking at your interview process, how far you'd come, and each time, it's important for us all to look at how far we've come in our careers, regardless of, the extra 6 years of school they might have. You're still in a similar spot to them, right?
Yeah, that kind of blew my mind. I think you hit it spot on. An advanced degree is helpful, but not required. And PhDs in particular, I think, so the PhDs I worked with at LinkedIn many of them were not doing work related to their PhD. But those who were super specialized. So like, for example, there are some areas that are hot topics in the industry right now. One is causal inference. One I saw at LinkedIn was differential privacy. The people that get put on these kind of very new emerging fields and problems are people who are like academics in that field. So, just for these emerging problems, the industry will seek out the top academics to continue doing their work just within the industry. I think the rest of the work, so I was a product data scientist at LinkedIn. I was on a team of like 20 product data scientists. I want to say about half of them were PhDs, but they were PhDs in like astrophysics and like other stuff that, it's totally not relevant to optimizing sign-up flows or whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, I had an interview, I think it was last week, so it'll have already come out when this comes out. The guy's name is Edward Rapp. Really great interview. But he basically said a PhD is just proof that you're willing to like work really hard and you're a glutton for punishment, right? And that's, go ahead.
Well, it is exactly so what a PhD proves is that you are willing to dedicate yourself to long hours of painful research on a single topic for literal years of your life. And you know what? That's actually right. And that's a very little immediate payoff. Yeah. And that's actually a valuable skill as a data scientist.
Oh, absolutely. But at the same time, I think you clearly showed that you were willing to do that as well, doing the self-study and being able to pass this interview process. And so totally, if anyone takes anything away, is like, you can demonstrate that exact same skill. If I see someone and I look at their GitHub and they have like 30 projects where they've built some pretty cool stuff and it's following their own interests, and it's clear they've done a lot of work, like, in my mind, is that really different from what someone's done in a PhD? Like, as someone hiring, like, yes, they don't have a piece of paper, but I mean, they've clearly shown the proof of work. They've maybe had more diversity of what they've been working on. Maybe they've built things that other people could use. You don't always find that in a PhD. And again, nothing to say that there's anything wrong with PhDs. Like, One of my friends are PhDs. They're brilliant. They work and built stuff that have actually changed the world. But a guy in his garage, a guy coding in his basement can also change the world.
It's true. Yeah. I would say uh, the signal that a PhD gives, the value of a PhD to the industry is not necessarily in the subject matter of the PhD, but it's in the fact that this person went through a systematic, long, like arduous process towards finding the answer to something, or like, expanding human knowledge in some field.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more on that front.
For me though, I managed to do that in my own way, just by obsessively trying to become a data scientist and spending a lot of time doing that. Just without like a piece of paper.
Well, I want to talk about the obsessiveness you have in a second here. I do want to kind of ask a couple more questions about sort of
Sure,
the
yeah.
LinkedIn experience as well. And, you talked about how you probably didn't use LinkedIn as well as you could when starting out. How would you use LinkedIn now if you were trying to maximize on uh, whether it's job opportunities or whether just like getting the most out of the platform? I mean, to me, LinkedIn, it's a very legitimate social network because you have your work and your likeness attached to it more. So there's a lot more accountability, which makes it a safer place for people to share. And I mean, I've gained a lot of traction there because it's very similar to the content that I produce. It's very in line. And I think that our branding is becoming synonymous with our work at the same time now. So I see just a lot of upside with the platform regardless. But I'd love to hear sort of an insider perspective on, how you would perhaps pursue that platform as anyone learning or anyone who's already a data scientist.
Like the aha moment for me on how to use LinkedIn came from realizing that LinkedIn is not it's not like a place that is geared for one specific thing. It is a general purpose social media space used by people from many different with people with many different objectives, but largely speaking, you can break them down into like recruiters, job seekers, salespeople, students, or I think those are like probably some big categories. And each of these groups kind of uses the platform differently, and that's why LinkedIn has separate products catering to them. So for salespeople, there's Sales Navigator, and for like recruiters, there's like all these recruiter search engines and like job posting management stuff that they have. They have LinkedIn Learning for students and professionals trying to upskill themselves. And so I started to see from the inside how these different groups were using it very differently. And what that, I think the picture that I built in my mind after working there is that LinkedIn is kind of like a massive gym. So like people are coming there every day for like various different reasons. And it's like a gym membership. Like it gives you access to all these tools. But then, like having an account isn't enough, in much the same way as having a gym membership is not enough. You gotta figure out what you want out of it. You gotta go there, learn how to use some of the tools, maybe talk to some people, and like, make some friends and get some help from them on like achieving your goals. And that's how I would use LinkedIn now, is kind of like, just a place where I should probably spend a little bit of time, like every week or something, just to hang out with the people there, and also like build my career prospects. And they're great tools, like LinkedIn's salary tool, which you get with a premium subscription. That's helped me negotiate a higher salary for myself. There's another tool I like using, which is it's called Premium Company Insights. So this is basically when you look up a company on LinkedIn and you have a premium account, you get like an insights tab that tells you like how much they've been hiring over the past 2 years. So, if you're getting hit up by a company that's like tanking in the past few years, you kind of, you have that context. It tells you how long people stay at the company. So like the median tenure, that's helpful to know whether it's like a, 1 year and done kind of company, or like, people are actually spending long stints there. And so there are all these tools, but ultimately it just depends on what you want out of it and how much initiative you're going to take.
Yeah, well, I think those are all incredible insights. I love the gym analogy. That's not a way that I'd ever thought of it before, but I mean, it's absolutely 100% true.
When you
And
think about what people are posting there, a lot of it is performative. People are just practicing doing stuff. And okay, there's a lot of self-congratulatory content on there as well. And a lot of those milestones actually deserve it. I think it just, the algorithm tends to kind of push those up. And I personally tend to see a lot of it. It can get old after a while, but like, hey, these are people who are accomplishing things and sharing it on LinkedIn. These like inspiration.
well, I loved what you said about the algorithm pushing things. I think that's something that is really overlooked by a lot of people, whether it's on LinkedIn or YouTube. If you're a business or you're trying to grow an audience or you're trying to educate, both of these platforms are the most powerful mechanisms for organic growth and marketing that are out there. You just produce what you were planning to produce, and if it creates value, it perpetuates across a network. And there's this incredible effect of being able to grow your presence without you having to do any hard selling or hard marketing or whatever that might be. And that's one of the things that I loved about YouTube in general and starting out, is that I could make my videos. And I still do. I make videos that I think are going to be valuable to people, and I don't have to sell them to anyone. I don't have to say, go watch my videos. The algorithm does that. Same thing on LinkedIn. If I'm talking about a work opportunity that might be there, if I'm talking about, hey, I made this podcast episode with Ash and it's going to be really great, people share it and like it, and it gets picked up in the algorithm, right? And it's one of these things where, like, that, I wouldn't say it's a hitting feature. It's pretty obvious, but that use case, I think, is overlooked by almost everyone except the content creators themselves. And that virality or that ability to grow can create so many opportunities for you.
Totally. I think nowadays it's hard to really build this realization until you try to think about, well, what would I do if I was making videos and did not have YouTube? And it was the case like 20 years ago, we didn't have YouTube. If you made a video, you had to like, you probably had it stored physically somewhere on like a disc or a tape, and you could make copies of it, and maybe someone would buy it. Yeah, maybe someone would buy it. Maybe it would end up in like a local store somewhere, but like the distribution that YouTube gives you or that LinkedIn gives you is like, it's amazing. Today you can make a short video, and depending on your network, it's almost guaranteed that thousands of professionals will actually see it within seconds or minutes.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, that's something that, it's obviously changed my life. I mean, an algorithm takes a video and, I gain a lot of traction. And it's one of these things that are like, well, that happened overnight. And I mean, it's obviously hard to adjust to. There's clear negatives to some of those things as well, is that, there's accountability to more people, whatever that might be. But I think, at least in my case, the positives of having these systems that allow you to focus on what you enjoy doing, and you can, get an audience, get a form of passive income, whatever that is pretty mind blowing when we really take a step back and look at it. And I wouldn't say all its glory, but in its expansiveness. So
yeah, I had my first, sorry, I just want to add one thing.
For sure.
A couple of weeks ago, I had my first viral LinkedIn post. I was leaving LinkedIn, and so I kind of wrote like a goodbye post and put a picture of like my laptop and stuff. People do the work badge post when they leave a company, and it was amazing. Like, I wrote it on a Saturday, which is like a low day. So LinkedIn is kind of a weekday heavy traffic pattern. And I wrote it on a Saturday, but by Monday, more than 50,000 professionals had seen it. Most of them from the industries that I care about from my career. Almost every single person I've ever worked with in my career reacted to it. It was just amazing that I was able to share something, and literally everyone who wished me positively, like, gave me saw it and had a way to encourage me, and it was great.
Yeah, and again, we'd mentioned how it's generally a pretty positive feedback loop because of the accountability and like your real face, your real job is associated with it. I will say there's still, I have some female colleagues that get some pretty creepy messages still, which blows my mind. That's like, hey, she could screenshot this and you probably won't be employable ever again, but you're doing this on a professional platform. It boggles my mind.
It is a real problem. People just some people just don't behave well and are in the mildest cases they're annoying, and in the most harmful cases they're actually like abusive, destructive, damaging, and harmful. And yeah, it's a problem that all the major networks I think are obviously aware of, but I don't know. Yeah, I think the solutions are kind of just hard, because you also don't want to limit free speech, and you want to be thoughtful about it.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's a good answer, but I do think that LinkedIn, of all of the social platforms that I've seen, is by far the best on that front, just because it's it's tied to your professional well-being for the most part.
Yeah, so I think most professionals have a lot at stake with their jobs, and yeah.
So I wanted to kind of backtrack to that rabbit hole. We've talked a reasonable amount about obsession in this interview, and I want to take that to the next level. I mean, that's something that I can relate with a little bit, and I'd like to hear how you turned obsession into a powerful, positive mechanism for yourself, rather than letting it act as kind of a negative deterrent for your career and your life.
Well, I'll start by saying I'm still working on that, but I think I've had a long history with mental health problems. I spent most of my adult life in like major depression due to certain personal traumas that I faced. I also have a history of kind of compulsive and also impulsive behaviors, but not to the point where a medical diagnosis is necessary, just sort of stuff that I do. And this impacts me in the standard day-to-day things. It's like, starting a new show and binge watching it, or starting a new video game and then just playing through to the end, spending like a couple of weekends doing that. But it also, like, the compulsive behavior also applies for me in other ways, like in academics or at work. So it helped me to go from like zero to highly skilled with data science tools. I would I would start an online course and just beast through it until I completed every single video and exercise. I would decide to build something I didn't know how to, and like leave no stone unturned until I figured it out. So for example, back in 2016, I wanted to build like a generative neural network that sent tweets out. So I had to learn how to build a neural network with Python. I had to learn about I had to read some papers on how those work, and I had to train the model and figure out how to host it on AWS, and make sure I had like a Twitter bot that could then receive tweets from my AWS instance. It was not the most complicated thing, but for someone who didn't know anything, I just went straight into it. Like, I just read every single doc that I could. I read every single paper that I could, and I just got to the point where, even though I wound up, I built a bot, it tweeted some stuff, and then eventually I took it down. But in the process, I obsessed over it so much that I actually got like pretty good at using Python, AWS, and the Twitter API. And I think that experience translates to, so for AWS, it translates to any cloud really, they all have similar features. And for Twitter, like any API really, you can kind of translate the learning about that to other APIs, I mean. And I guess the obsessive parts of my personality have driven me to do this, like pick up a new software library, go look at the documentation and try out every single thing on there. And it's the sort of thing that, our tools in data science are so kind of complex, and some of the business cases are so complex that I do feel like this, while it does have the potential to take me down rabbit holes and make me waste a bunch of time. I think on balance, it's actually helped me more than it's hurt me, because it's helped me really just like without giving in, just master the complexity that exists in the business.
Well, I think, mental health is something that we don't talk about enough in this profession. I think data science is, any technical profession, it can be lonely. It can be wrought with a lot of failure. If we talk about the interview process, just getting an interview, the last numbers I heard is around 2%, just like just landing the interview percent from a traditional job board, right? And I mean, in a profession that the application process, those types of things are wrought with quite a bit of failure, it's really easy to get discouraged. It's really easy to get down on yourself. And I mean, those things are perpetuated with any pre-existing mental health challenges that you have and that you're working through. And I think that it's really important to be introspective, and it's also really important to use data to evaluate these things. Like, rather than evaluating your success rate and say, oh, I'm getting 3% interviews, I'm a failure, looking at that against a benchmark and saying I'm getting 3% versus the average 2%, I'm actually a big success. And like framing your thought or framing your journey in one of those lights, I mean, it's very difficult, something I also struggle with, but it's important to have those conversations with yourself, whether it's with a therapist or with your family or whoever it is, because everyone has struggles. Everyone has, idiosyncrasies of their career and the hardships they go through that can make this whole process even more challenging, more complex. And we never know someone else's journey, right? And it's part of that mystery makes it hard for us to see other people succeed when we think we're doing all the same things they are, and we're not succeeding as much. And I'm grateful that you're willing to share those types of challenges that you've had, because I think not enough people are talking about them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'd be lying if I was saying that like my whole journey into data science was not like soul crushing in some way. It absolutely was. Every single, I've had so many panic attacks during interviews, and just like I'm sure at least some of the interviews that I got rejected from were because I was physically having a panic attack in the interview, and it's hard. Yeah, like when you're studying for interviews, it's usually by yourself. A lot of times when you're working, it's usually by yourself. Like as a data scientist, you do have the team sports. I'm constantly like moving between like tight collaboration with my non-technical business partners who are in charge of, actually driving, like flying the plane. And I'm kind of, and then I go like figure out what they're looking at, and then go. Hey, are you still there? I think I lost you.
Yep. Sorry, we cut out for like 2 seconds. We're back.
Oh yeah. So I kind of have to keep going back to like the cockpit where my business partners are sitting. They describe like kind of what they're looking at to me and say, hey, which way do we go? And I need to go back and figure out like, which way they should go. And when I'm back there in the back end, I don't really, no one really knows what I'm doing back there. That's because that's my job. But, I'm also like, usually when you're sitting in the cluster trying to make it like crunch your numbers, that is, I think, like one of the loneliest feelings in the world. It's like no one can understand the pain that I have to go through to get this freaking report out before like it's time to make the decision.
Yeah. And I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but early on when I've always had this desire or this urge for entrepreneurship, right? And I've always wanted to work for myself. And one of the reasons why is I hated the interview process so much that I never wanted to have to apply for a job ever again. So
wow,
there's two options to do that, right? Is I can either create content, I can show everything that I've done through YouTube, LinkedIn, through my GitHub, whatever it is, and recruiters will reach out, and that makes the interview process so much less, right? There are some people I've heard that's like, hey, we see what you've done at this company. We're not going to let you in for free, but like you're going to do a interview like type of process, right? And I basically set this goal. It didn't work out, but it was that I never wanted to have to formally apply or formally interview ever again. And, TBD if that's going to be the case going forward. I don't see myself switching roles or switching careers. Unfortunately, the content business I'm doing is growing. But that
Dude,
was yeah.
I gotta say, like you're doing great on your path of content creation, but I also feel like you're not wrong. Like tech interviews suck. They're even if you did really well, they're in the very best case, you're still exhausted. I remember the very first onsite I had, it was at Apple. They put me in a conference room and they didn't let me, and like it was 6 or 7 hours by the time I got out after like all the interviews. I had like one bathroom break. Someone accompanied me to the bathroom because it's like all top secret within that company. And, like there's a lot of protocols. And I remember coming out of that and just being like, oh my gosh, like this is the most tired this is the most tired I've ever been. And they're not like your day-to-day job is usually not like that. But the fact that they put you through that, they have to ask you that much stuff to be confident enough to hire you, I think is like so crazy.
Yeah. So before moving into data science, I was doing quite a bit of, I was interviewing for management consulting. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was sitting in an interview with one of the big 3 consulting companies. And those interviews, they're case interviews. They're notoriously difficult, pretty similar to like a sort of like a coding whiteboarding session, but it's more theoretical. So it's like, we have this business problem. We want you to work through it and whatever it is. And they gave me a piece of paper with some graphs on it. I had to interpret them. And I think I'm quick on my feet. I think I understand a lot of these things, but, I was thinking, when is this ever going to happen in when am I ever not going to be prepared like this or understand the context of the situation in a real business scenario? Like I thrive. I think I'm probably one of the best people that I know if I have a little bit of previous information. Like I didn't do all my homework. I can wing it just a little bit, but it's also, I've done my homework because I probably do more homework than most people. And I was like, this is a clean slate scenario. I have no background. This is not where my strength is. And this isn't going to be my strength in consulting. And I just remember sitting there and being like, this is my dream company at the time. And I don't want to work here if this is how they're going to evaluate me. And so I was like, what can I do to avoid this in the future? And always the answer is going to be, if you want to completely avoid it, work for yourself. But, or, get through it once and find a company and a role you really like, and you won't ever have to do it again in theory.
Yeah. My advice for anyone feeling disheartened about just the system with technical interviews is that it's ultimately it's a skilled trade. And I think the interviews exist to, they're a little, they overstep their goals in a way. One of the goals is to make sure that you're weeding out unskilled or underskilled candidates. The other one is just like having these arbitrary internal standards for what level of skill someone needs to be at before they're like worthy of getting hired to your company. And I think this is where, like we talked about this earlier in the podcast, I think that the industry does have a responsibility to keep developing the next generation of talent. It serves the industry's needs to do that. It's just there's no short-term payoff for doing it. And so I think like in a game theoretical sense, like no company actually is incentivized enough to do it, and therefore everyone's worse off.
Yeah, there's a big build or buy equation that the build is not has not quite reached maximum viability yet.
The good news is from experience, after doing data science interviews for, gosh, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years now, I can confidently say that as you gain more experience, you can become better at them. The last 2 data science interviews I did, I just I finished the technical rounds within like half the time. So like a 45-minute interview, I would finish like 25, 20 minutes and then spend the rest of the time just chit chatting with the recruiter, with the interviewer. And yeah, I think it's possible to get better at it, but it does take time.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important to note as well. That even for me, not liking those interviews, if I sat down and tried to learn the interviews more and like master that process, it's something that we're all capable of doing. My problem is that I didn't see directly how that learning the interview would help me on the job. And I'm someone who's like super stubborn, and I'm like, screw this if it's not going to help me in the, but you can do it. I always have a course on why it's important to do that if you want to land this job. So I've kind of two last topics I want to cover. We only have a couple minutes left, but the first is this transition into. Are you okay on time as well? I want to make sure
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, cool. The first is your transition into your new role. What was that experience like versus your previous interviewing experiences, wherever that might be? And then the last is leaving the floor open for you to talk about anything that you'd really like to.
Yeah. Well, transitioning. So I spent a couple of years at LinkedIn, and once I got into LinkedIn, I started getting a lot more like recruiter outreach from within the industry because it's like the brand definitely helps. And so this is all just like inbound recruiters reaching out to me. And when that happens, I usually take the call or respond to the message. And even if it's saying, you know what, I don't really want to interview for this role, but maybe I got someone I know. When I got reached out from when I got outreach from Atlassian, it was interesting. I wasn't seriously thinking about leaving LinkedIn. LinkedIn's doing really well right now, by the way, and the areas that I was working on had a lot of really good growth prospects. But it was interesting enough for me. One of my coworkers had moved there a few months previously, and so I was intrigued. And I just kept like delaying the interviews and like, hey, can we do it like after Thanksgiving and after Christmas and whatever. And eventually I got like to the final rounds. That's when I really started taking it seriously. And so I spent a lot of time studying and like doing my homework on the company. And it turns out that like what I learned through that exercise was that there was an even bigger opportunity for me at Atlassian compared to at LinkedIn. And so that was kind of like new ground for me. I don't think I have ever been in a position where I'm already in a great job and an even better job is put in front of me. But I think that's kind of what it boiled down to at the end. Like I said, like the technical interviews that I did, I found them, not like ridiculously easy. They were probably some of the like from the problems that got pulled out of like the intermediate or hard portions of the internal question bank. But I don't know, like found them easy enough. And the role that I've taken on now is a more senior role. I have like I have ownership over a pretty broad area within the business, and it's like across products and across some business functions as well. And I'm just kind of I'm still settling in, but I'm looking forward to like several months of battle royale, like ahead of me. And by battle royale, I mean in like the most fun way, like Mortal Kombat battle royale, or like Street Fighter.
Some Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's fun.
Well, I think that's kind of cool is that you went from startup where you're working on a broad spectrum of things. I imagine LinkedIn was a little bit more narrow scope. And then as you're progressing further in your career, you're able to work on a broader, you have broader ownership of things, and you also can bring that experience and ownership to that stuff as well. And I mean, that's something that I think a lot of people are interested in. These in very big companies, like you're often pretty siloed, and that can be great into a specific vertical, and that can be great, but it is also, I think it's harder to stay in a specific silo for too long because it can get a little bit repetitive. And so it's
Yeah,
cool to see
totally.
you being able to go out and have more range in this new role to make a lot of impact, which is what we're all striving for.
Yeah, one thing I will say is that having recently been in the job market is hot, man. It's never been hotter for data scientists. I think like there is this sense. I've seen some people on LinkedIn say that the data science job market is saturated. That's not actually the case. It may seem saturated if you just look at the number of applicants, but I think as we discussed before, many of those applicants are, that they're just not going to have a shot because of the very high like skill level set by the hiring managers. So like, if you ignore the applicants that are not that are not going to make it, I think like it starts to become a very like a job market that's really scarce. And I would argue that's why wages are so high within the field right now. There's just way more work to be done than people available to do it.
And I think that there's the spectrum where you have like the junior data scientist market is pretty saturated, right? People that are entry
Definitely.
level trying to get in. But once you reach that next tier, maybe it's even just a 6 months of experience, a year of experience, completely different game where, you're getting a lot more interviews, your salary expectations go way up. And I personally think it's possible to bridge out of that junior data scientist role with like an incredibly strong portfolio. And like that's a differentiator for a lot of people. And so I mean that's something I kind of want to leave with, is that whatever you can do to get out of that junior data scientist band for application, like there's so much space right after that for opportunity, for jobs, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I would also add that if anyone's looking to land like a junior gig, like I think a lot of people I've talked to on Clubhouse have been like really concerned about what kinds of projects they should do or what their portfolio should look like and how they can differentiate themselves. And I just want to say, listen, like you don't need everything to be perfect. You're like, this is something you're going to be building like throughout your career. So whatever you're doing now, like you'll just be like 2 years from now, you'll be throwing away the old projects and adding new work projects. And so, it's okay if it's not, if everything doesn't look like I don't know, like perfect, like that one person who you've almost certainly seen who posted a Medium blog about like their like amazing journey into data science. So.
I agree. And I think it's also, I have the podcast a couple of weeks ago with Jeremy Harris, who's the head of Sharpest Minds, or is one of the co-founders of Sharpest Minds.
Oh, I love that guy. Yeah.
Towards Data Science podcast. And we go really deep into that. So if anyone wants more info, we can always rewind. And he did this research about how to specifically differentiate yourself, which is really good.
Oh,
so I can send that over
great.
to you too.
Yeah. I've talked with the Sharpest Minds folks like really early on when they were starting out, and just trying to learn about this model that they have. Really interesting. I would recommend any listeners go check them out
for sure.
Like either as a mentor or a mentee in the data science space.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's all the questions I had. Again, if there's any concluding remarks you want to add, I'm always happy to hear them. Otherwise, we're welcome to end things here.
Well, there's two places we can go with this. One is kind of like just a crazy insight I got from spending a lot of time for myself over the past year. And another is we can talk about we can talk more about like job interviews and the inequality of opportunity that I think we see in the tech industry.
Why not talk about both? Let's, let me.
Okay, let's see if we can do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I think we do it in a couple of minutes.
I just want to send one quick message.
Oh, for sure. Dang, I didn't realize we're talking for over an hour.
Yeah, hour and a half, man. All right, we're ready to roll.
Okay. So like one of the challenges that I was never able to wrap my head around the entire time I was in like not and the entire time I was outside the tech industry was that there is definitely an inequality of opportunity. And it's not a great shocker. Like a lot of the world is unequal. But for me, the moment it clicked was when I thought about it in like sports terms, because that's just something I get. I follow European football or soccer as it's known in North America. And like this is a field in which there's an area like any sport, millions of kids want to be soccer players. And in that way, it's kind of like data science on a bigger scale, where there's this pool of aspirants who are, like who visualize themselves as potentially being one of the greats someday. And just like data science, you can get started learning with some basic equipment and YouTube. But at the end of the day, if you want to go pro, you need to try out for a team. And when you try out for a team, you're competing with the people who are already pros. Like some of those pro soccer players, they will have been getting trained in soccer since they were literal infants. So they got a head start over you. And some of those people will have been like they will have a family history of being in the sports. So like they may get advice from and wisdom from their social circle in navigating their way through opportunities in the industry. So in fact, you look at the very top soccer players like Neymar and Messi. Like Neymar is the son of a soccer player. Messi is the son of a soccer coach. And so in addition to dedicating themselves over years to building their skills every single day, they have this extra benefit of having started early and having the social infrastructure in place to kind of give them an additional advantage. And data science, I think, is no different. So if you're like me and you started later on, or like you don't have a family with a tech industry network, then I think you need to be prepared for a harder experience overall.
Yeah, and I really like the sports analogy, because I also think that it talks about how you would break into one of the elite clubs, right? So in golf, it's a similar thing. You go play in Asia, which has a slightly weaker tour, but it gets a lot of notoriety. You go play in Europe, you go play in South America, you go play in these minor league systems where you can prove yourself. And, those minor league systems, might be a smaller company, it might be a startup, it might be whatever. And if you're looking at European soccer, a quote unquote startup club, essentially, in theory, could become one of the elite clubs one day, just like Lime did for you. So that's that true, analogy really does tie things together, hopefully, is that, just because it is a very difficult playing field, there are intermediate steps. There are different routes that you can take, maybe not straight to the top, but, it's not a lost cause. You still, most people do not make it, just like in soccer, right? You're going to wash out at a certain point. But the people that do, that stick through the grind of all those different experiences, different leagues, whatever that is, different teams, they also get a unique experience that maybe the people that didn't go straight to the top get as well. And they might learn some things, pick some things up from playing in these different environments or working in these different environments.
Yeah, totally, man. I love how you connected with that immediately, because that was like what made it click for me. And there's so many parallels, like go on and on. But okay, I'll leave you with this, Ken. So I had this weird, like, I don't know, just like an insight over the past year. So like 2020 sucked, and I just like spent a lot of time with, within the confines of my own apartment. I spent thousands of hours playing Sid Meier's Civilization 6, which is this like historical strategy game that I'm into.
I personally prefer Civ 5, because Civ 6 takes, like, the games take like 20 hours.
Oh, true. Yeah. And it's one of the things that I like. I can get compulsive about it, and it doesn't do anything wrong to me. Like it doesn't harm me. So anyway, I got into studying history through playing this game, and been watching weird archival footage on YouTube, reading books from the big history genre. And here's what I learned about data. I learned that people in Mesopotamia, like 5,000 years ago, so I'm talking about 3,000 BC, something like that, they had states and they had taxes. And the way they kept track of records for their society was through oral tradition, which means that all the data had to be memorized by actual people. So if you were a king, you would have like a staff of people who were specialized in memorizing and recalling records. And eventually, as society scaled, their data scaled, and it became too much for people to rely on human memory. So that's when they adopted this new technique of writing as a way to persist their data on tablets. And so when you look at the oldest tablets in the museums from Mesopotamia, they contain data on who paid their taxes, how many cattle exist, and stuff like that. There's even one, I've seen one in the British Museum in London that's got records of beer allocated to workers. And I thought startups today are innovative for giving booze to employees. Turns out it's been going on for quite some time, right?
It's really funny.
Here's the mind-blowing realization. It's like people have been dealing with big data problems since the beginning of society. And today we're like no different. We're just like at a different scale with our data. Like our data is bigger, our tech is more advanced, but as industry data scientists, we're still asking the same like 5,000-year-old questions. Like we're not asking who's paid their taxes. We're asking who paid their monthly subscription. That's it. You know, like instead of how many cattle do we have, it's like, how many paid users do we have? You know, and, you know, as dehumanizing as that sounds, it is literally, it's what we do.
Yeah, I know. I that is like so fascinating to me. If you may or may not know, I'm co-teaching this course called Designing Ethical AI Systems.
Oh,
and
awesome.
One of the first things that the co-teacher did is she looked back at kind of a history of data. And a lot of the things that we're looking at is taxes, whatever that might be. But one of the other things that people tracked a lot historically was slave ownership. And it's one of these things where it's like, you know, I think it's important to realize that like data, it's not good or bad, but how we use it is something that's really compelling. And how are we using that subscriber data? How are we using these other things? And, you know, is it perpetuating inequality, whether it's in the job market or in our products or whatever that might be? Those are questions that we're always going to be wanting to ask. And that's what's going to either kind of make her, you know, cause a lot of problems for the field or help the field to continue to perpetuate and become a better place for everyone. So I love that idea. And I love the startup beer thing. I'm 100% going to steal that. So amazing. Perfect. So Ash, I had so much fun chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on. And I think everyone who tuned in is going to just, you know, learn so much from this conversation here.
I hope so. Thanks for having me, Ken. It's a pleasure to meet you again and see you on LinkedIn and see you on Clubhouse.
Hell yeah.